Welcome to the Indian Military Heritage Festival, ladies and gentlemen. We look forward to your presence to an interesting, informative, and exciting sessions as we proceed for the day. My first session here that we are going to attend with all of you, it's on cybersecurity, protecting military CII threat analysis and response. In an increasingly interconnected world where technological advancements continue to reshape the landscape of modern warfare, the protection of our nation's vital military infrastructure has been never more vital. The discussion will be an exploration of the complex and evolving challenges posed by cyber threats to our military CII and seek actionable insights and strategies from a panel of esteemed experts. May I please call upon stage Vice Admiral Tarun Sobti, AVSM VSM DCNS, Vineet Madan, Director Cybersecurity Technology, NCOE DSCI, and Colonel M. Sushil Pradhan. The session will be moderated by Major General Pawan Anand, AVSM retired.
Thank you. Admiral Sobti, Colonel Sushil Pradhan, Colonel Vineet Madan. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to get together here to discuss a few issues which are now becoming very focused and interesting when it comes to domains of warfare. In fact, cyber warfare is an extension of policy by actions taken in cyberspace by state and non-state actors, constituting a serious threat to a nation's security. It's an internet-based conflict involving political or security-motivated attacks on information or information systems. It results in disabling official or military websites, networks, disrupting essential services, stealing or crippling data, financial systems, and a host of other possibilities. I think the first time that we can officially say that we experienced cyber warfare was probably when the Stuxnet virus hit Iran's nuclear program, very largely disrupting it. Cyber warfare may also comprise of cyber terrorism, which causes harm for sociological, ideological, religious, or political reasons. Cyber fraud for monetary gain by phishing. Cyber espionage, gaining proprietary information. Cyber stalking or bullying, or cyber assaults, which largely result in damage to information, data, equipment, physically or in digital form. It's pretty telling to hear that India ranks amongst the top 5 nations which is at risk of cyber attack, and we remain there for the last 5 to 7 years. At the top of it, of course, is some very different countries: Algeria, Bolivia, Pakistan. China comes next, and it is at a risk index of 18.5. India is at 16.5. When you look at the other end of the spectrum, France has an index of 5.2, then comes Canada, Australia, the United States, and finally the United Kingdom with 2.8. So we get a sense, without knowing what the index is all about, we get a sense of where we stand and how high the risk is. Cybercrime has hit India heavily, but since the armed forces function on exclusive, or you can say private networks, institutional attacks have not been witnessed, or so we think. I have no doubts personally, and I'm sure there may be others who have doubts on that, whether APTs even now are embedded in our systems. Some examples of this we have seen coming from data from the United States. It's almost horrifying to learn that just about 7 years ago, they procured motherboards from a certain country and were unable to carry out thorough checks perhaps, but there was an extra chip embedded in every motherboard that went into the computers of the Pentagon. That is where cyber espionage would have taken place. Now, military components of warfare keep evolving. It transitions from strategic to op combat control systems based on real-time battlefield management systems and information superiority. It transitions from warfighting in the cyberspace, airspace, and involves a very high degree of intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. It uses robotics now, stealth concepts, long-range strikes. It also relies now on irregular forms of warfare and irregular forms of troop deployments, asymmetric combat operations, and special forces. And then it also relies on radio, electronics, leading on to psychological warfare, information warfare, on all cyber assets. I think one of the turning points in recent warfare has been when the drones were employed in the war between Azerbaijan and Armenia. The next turning point to my mind has come when combat operations in Ukraine were preceded by cyber operations by Russia. You can clearly divide those operations into three stages. Strategic cyber espionage was the first stage, and it focused on Ukrainian government bodies. The second stage was pre-positioning disruptive cyber effects in critical infrastructure. And then the third stage comes when they deployed persistent cyber attacks as part of their kinetic combat operations. So if you remember, on 24th of January, 24th of February, when the special operations of Russia started in Ukraine, they were preceded by massive attacks which started on 14th of January, which is good about 40 days before the actual special operations began. It did cripple cyber infrastructure or digital infrastructure in Ukraine. However, they managed to recover in about a day or two. Then on the 15th of February, there were massive attacks. These were DDoS attacks. That kind of gave an indication that there was much more to come. And then on the 23rd of February, just one day before the special operation, there were huge malwares which were inducted into the Ukrainian systems, one of them being, of course, the Viper malware. There was massive DDoS attacks which crippled many of the systems. And then they hacked into the Viasat, thereby affecting internet communications of the Ukrainians. It's also a telling point that from 23rd, 24th, when these attacks took place, to 28th of February, you had Starlink coming in and providing the required internet communications and other facilities which it provided to the Ukrainians. So there is an aspect of commercial and corporate employment in combat operations. The People's Republic of China, too, has been identified as a major malicious cyber activity hub, as far as at least adversarial perspectives are concerned. China's Ministry of State Security has been identified, amongst others, as a criminal hacker, targeting into maritime systems, not only in the US, but with other armies, aviation assets, defense, education, and healthcare. They have stolen information from something which seems as innocuous as stealing information of the Ebola virus for vaccine research, down to APTs lodged in military servers. In fact, Microsoft Exchange servers were targeted in March 21, whereupon active measures have been taken now by the United States to harden protection against malicious attacks and ransomware. Compare this with India, and we have a lot of work on our hands. As India goes digital in a big way, and 5G becomes one of the major pillars of our critical information infrastructure, and these begin to control actual infrastructure like the power grids, electricity, our healthcare systems, and so on, our attack surfaces increase and our vulnerability increases. Prime Minister Modi is on record to say that nations must take responsibility to ensure digital space does not become a playground for dark forces of terrorism and radicalization. It does kind of hark to what we see now happening in the Middle East. He also said, security challenges will be less predictable and technology changes will make responses much more difficult. Domination of cyberspace is therefore increasingly important. And then he went on to say, when we speak of a digital India, we must also have a digital armed force. So we have with us today to discuss all this, a very eclectic mix of very well-placed, highly qualified speakers amongst them. But before I go to them, let me just give you a sense about what the United Services Institution of India is doing and how it is positioning itself as a cyber think tank, along with its focus on deep technologies, with its linkages with strategy and security. Our focus at the USI will also be on policy and science of cybersecurity and technology. We will avoid run-of-the-mill stuff so as to avoid cluttering up our dashboards. We plan to build a body of knowledge in cybersecurity, solve hard problems at the national level, and put up credible defense against APTs and such like vulnerabilities as a nation. And we want it all to be homegrown. Keeping this in mind, the USI is now in the process of establishing a cyber center of excellence, which will look essentially at three verticals initially. It will look at cyber policy and advocacy. It will look at threat intelligence and advisories, and into research and development. And then in due course, we plan to move on to cyber awareness and training, open up a cyber range, and then get into a host of detailed, much more focused training activities across not only the military but also the corporates. So today, to discuss with us about the topic in hand, I have three very experienced and knowledgeable gentlemen. It's a pleasure to have with us Vice Admiral Tarun Sobti. He was commissioned in the Indian Navy in 1988, 72nd course NDA, and I'm happy to say he passed out with the President's Gold Medal. And from the Naval Academy, as a midshipman training, he passed out with the Sword of Honor. He is a navigation and direction specialist, has attended the staff course in France and the Naval Higher Command in India. He commanded INS Nishank, INS Kora, and INS Kolkata. He has been the Naval Attaché in Russia, Deputy Commandant of the Naval Academy at Azimala, Fleet Officer commanding the Eastern Fleet, and the Director General of Project Seabird. Currently, we are actually very fortunate to have him as the Deputy Chief of Naval Staff. Then we have with us Colonel Vineet Madan. He's from the Corps of Signals, and he's done 23 years of service in uniform. In fact, he's very lately hung up his uniform. And he has immense experience in translating complex technologies for user-level adaptation. He's also conceptualized network architecture for technology evaluation and has planned and rolled out strategic landline projects in IT, telecom, and cellular networks for the Indian Army. He's a BTech in IT and telecommunications and MTech in computer science and engineering from IIT Kharagpur. He has been awarded with the Chief of Army Staff's Commendation Card. He's currently with the Data Security Council of India, where he leads the National Center of Excellence in Cyber Security Technology, Development, and Entrepreneurship. It's a joint initiative between the DSCI and the Ministry of Electronics and Technology. Then we have with us Colonel Sushil Pradhan. He is the Executive Director and COO at Mitkat Advisory, a certified data center professional and a military veteran with over 33 years of experience, 11 of them in the corporate sector. He's an expert in evolving de-risking strategies in challenging geographies. and in emerging markets. So he's worked in Iraq, Asia Pacific, across China, Myanmar, Bangladesh, Japan, Singapore, and in Africa, besides, of course, India. He has a unique service. He has unique service in risk intelligence and information services, and in conducting crisis simulation exercises. He's a leading consultant for data center security. He was decorated for gallantry in counter-terrorist operations and participated in the United Nations peacekeeping operations in Sierra Leone. But what also resonates with me is he's a squash player, and so have I been. And what resonates between Admiral Sobti and me is I too passed out from the NDA with the gold medal and the Sword of Honor from the IMA. Just a word about me. After I got commissioned in the Indian Army in the Corps of Engineers, I commanded my own regiment, one armored engineer regiment. I commanded a strike engineer brigade, saw staff in counter-insurgency operations, including the Kargil War, and have done the Staff College course, the HTMC course, and the National Defense College course. After I finished with my 36 years of service in the Army, I joined the USI of India, did a short corporate stint with the National Highway Authority, and then got back to the USI. I'm a mentor at the National Defense College. So I also now spearhead the cyber initiatives and the technology initiatives, coupling them with geostrategy at the USI. Let's now get down to the business at hand about what I just opened up with a few statements earlier. And I'm going to request Admiral Sobti to generally give us his views on the topic, but also to give us an idea about the similarities and differences between traditional security operations and how cyber security operations are impacted by them. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, General Anand, my fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen. I must at the outset share with you that I am no expert in cyber security. I, by virtue of my position, I am more in the realm of policy as far as cyber security is concerned. I had been fortunate enough to hold charge as the Director General of Naval Operations also before I took over as the Deputy Chief of Naval Staff, and the Naval Cyber Group was as the DGNO directly under me. So thank you for the organizers of this Indian Military Heritage Festival for giving me an opportunity to share certain thoughts primarily aimed at the landscape and policy issues. As General Anand mentioned, cyber is a new field. It was an uncharted frontier till a decade ago. However, today it is the new frontier of as far as statecraft is concerned. And India is one of the top 3 countries faced with challenges in cyber attacks, as also mentioned by General Anand. In 2022, CERT-IN alone tracked nearly 14 lakh cyber incidents, and even the most recent G20 was not immune from attempts for cyber attacks, whether it was Delhi's transport, electricity, or the police department. ISRO is on a daily basis facing hundreds of cyber attacks. Shri Somnath, the chairman ISRO, mentioned that. And basically it brings out that the cybersecurity awareness still continues to be marginalized, at least in our country. There are also lack of international laws on establishing the identity of perpetrators, and even if you do establish the identity, how do you go on to have a prosecution mechanism for the cyber criminals, at least at the international level. The attacks have different potentials to disrupt a lot of things. I will cover that as I go along. But very important, at least from when we look at it from the services point of view, is that it can push a hostile narrative through influence operations to weaponize the public opinion in favor of a particular, of either a rival state or even a rival or a different thought process. So that is one of the areas which really worries us as far as the policy is concerned. Uh, the unfortunate truth about information security is that nobody really thinks about it so much until one is faced with an attack. And the Stuxnet computer virus attack on Iranian facilities was brought out very briefly. And as was what happened to Microsoft, Cisco, etc. in recent times. Kudankulam power plant has faced attacks. In 2020, the Mumbai power grid faced an attack. Airtel, Air India, AIMS, they've all faced attacks, which we are quite well aware of. As coming to military CIIs or critical information infrastructure, we have protect systems which comprise military platforms, military establishments, the electrical grid supporting the electrical grid supporting our establishments, military bases, military industrial establishments, communications, data centers, and in addition to the different systems and networks which are unique to each service of the armed forces, the three services also share some common operational technology, which are based on CIIs, like I mentioned, power supply, water distribution, sewage treated plants, etc., which are managed by the military engineering services. And how this becomes important is I will subsequently cover. SCADA system, distributed control systems are not very high on priority as far as protection from cyber attacks is concerned, but they affect our day-to-day life so much, and they are now becoming increasingly prevalent in our organizations. I don't know how many of you have read the recent novel by Elliot Ackerman and Admiral James G. Stavridis, 2034, a novel of the next World War. It envisions how large-scale cyber attacks would be the primary weapon that the two adversaries would use. And it's a very interesting description. But let me give you also a few scenarios which are relevant for today, at least as far as military CIIs are concerned. The operational information networks, till some years ago, the Navy ships, they navigated by observing celestial objects, and that's how they determined their position. Today we have GPS. We also have our own Indian systems which are trying to do the same thing. We have automatic information systems, electronic chart display information systems, radar, satellite communications networks, host of systems which are or could be prone to cyber attacks. And a simple malware can compromise the accuracy of the system, resulting in chaos actually. Errors in navigation, ships getting grounded, errors in navigation of airborne systems, also leading to collisions and groundings. We also could have denial of service as far as communications is concerned. So, coming on more to communications, we are getting into more and more complex communication systems, air and space communications, either through satellites or over the air. Command and control systems linking our operational networks to build a common operational picture, all can be subject to denial of service, and the information resources can also be manipulated to introduce erroneous information, leading to possible fratricide, destruction of our own resources in war, or the information can be leaked out to obtain inputs on the common operational picture that we have. An area which is not so focused upon is actually operational logistics. The spares and inventory softwares, our enterprise software for lifecycle management of equipment, administrative modules, human resource modules, all open to manipulation and attacks. And it can easily change the narrative of what information that the user is looking at. And besides the op logistics, the other area is that, for example, the armed forces are, especially the Army and the Air Force, much dependent on rail transportation for large-scale movement of military personnel and equipment. But the military is an end user in this, and the Indian Railways are actually the providers. So it becomes very important for the Indian Railways to make sure that their systems are well protected, uh, and so that the adverse impact, especially in a complex or a conflict situation, does not affect the movement of the personnel and equipment of the Army and the Air Force. Roads are also a means of transportation. A lot of cities are going in for smart city projects. Smart city projects dwell upon transportation, management of traffic, traffic signals, toll plazas, etc. So you can imagine if these things are manipulated, where the toll plaza becomes kind of inaccessible, or havoc is played on the traffic light systems to create traffic jams within the city. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that there are areas, the surface of exposure of the armed forces is therefore not just limited to what the military is doing, but there are so many systems that the military is dependent upon, as I brought out, rail and road transportation, which is also can be used to disrupt military activities. We also have a lot of surveillance systems, whether it is surveillance systems of the bases. It could be something simple as CCTV cameras, perimeter intrusion detection systems. Also connected sometimes through the Internet of Things. Either edge computing is happening and the information is being relayed, or it is being relayed through fiber optic networks. All this information is coming to security centers, and if it can be manipulated or fiddled with, you can have a possible vulnerability in your basic security, physical security, and it can be used for penetrating into bases. The similar system is actually be used by a national chain of radars, automatic information systems all along the coast. It's manned by the Navy, by the Coast Guard, by the Director General of Lights and Lighthouses. There are multiple government agencies that are contributing to this process. We are able to build a picture around our coast through a network which is of course coming into an important system called the information fusion system in the Indian Ocean region, and also our coastal security system, where we do image, where we are doing a maritime analysis center is there. So these are all dependent on networks, and if manipulated can really threaten the security in such a way that if somebody is trying to have an ingress along the coast and can for a brief period of time bring down the surveillance systems that are in that portion of the coast, it is possible to do a physical ingress into along the coast and then enter. And we all saw what happened in 2008. Of course, we've upped the guard since then, but we can never be completely immune to what anybody might want to try. If I try and do a threat analysis of the military CIIs, there is also the risk of we have machinery control systems and embedded systems within the ships. If there is a malware planted there, that is an area which of surface of exposure as far as the Navy is concerned. We have the problem of legacy systems. Now, legacy systems did not always take these into account. And as we're trying to do backward compatibility and maintaining interoperability, when we merge legacy systems with newer systems, we might be faced with a situation where the legacy systems have not taken this into account at the design stage. And if it's not taken into account at the design stage, then it is obviously not impervious to attacks. Attack vectors can also be targeting operators handling official correspondence in organizations, which is providing a pathway through a very simple from the client side attacks and system compromise. So both as far as defensive cyber as well as offensive cyber is concerned, targeting people is one of the main areas through which these vectors are carried forward. I'll try and kind of wind up now so that there's some more time for discussion by the panel, if you allow, sir. The adaptation and speed of new technologies like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, quantum computing, cloud computing, robotics. While we're trying to internalize these things, we are not as good as the industry as far as keeping the building up the defenses against these systems. Then I am sure some of my panelists who are much more greater expertise on this subject will probably cover some of these things. But what we try and do now is that we we focus on trusted source and trusted product. The reference framework, which is visible in the Government of India's trusted source and trusted product in the telecom sector, and the concept of secure by design in new induction systems and equipment is one area which will better aid in protection. We're also trying to work on improved awareness, or rather the legacy architecture is being improved through more mature vulnerability analysis and more comprehensive asset management, so that we can understand better where our vulnerabilities exist. One very common thing, and I'll probably, when I talk more about the comparison between standard traditional military and cyber security, is that the collection and assessment of the threat. So cyber threat intelligence is a very, very important area, and that can only happen through collaboration and cooperation, because there are many agencies and organizations that are actually assessing the threats. But if we do it in vertical silos, then our information gets limited. Cooperation and collaboration in this field is what gets us the bigger picture. General Anand said that I can take on in trying to compare traditional military security with cyber security. So what do we do in traditional military security? We have, I would say, the first thing is surveillance, threat assessment. Now I am talking about traditional security. Surveillance and threat assessment is taking place. We do intelligence gathering. We need to establish what our vulnerabilities are. We set up our defenses. And we set up a system where in case we are attacked, we are able to respond. And again, I am talking about the traditional security the armed forces do. But automatically in your mind, you would have realized that this is exactly what we need to be doing or are doing as far as cyber security is concerned. So the first thing is intelligence gathering and threat assessment, and know your vulnerabilities, build up systems to protect them, and then react to attacks. So cyber crisis management plans is therefore becomes a very, very important aspect of this. Now, I think these are the similarities. The differences are basically that cyber attacks can not just be state-sponsored or state-managed, but they can also be non-state actors. It could be anyone. Now, of course, in hybrid warfare, that is also happening increasingly as far as the traditional military is concerned. But one of the important things is that identity can be masked. Now, that's another thing that is happening in hybrid warfare. So, masking your identity, not knowing who's attacking you and where the attacks are coming from, is something which is a little more peculiar to cyber attacks. And the most important thing is we cannot see the enemy. We don't know who the enemy is, we cannot see them, so you can't mount a counter attack. And that, I think, is one of the major differences that we are facing. And the armed forces, who are used to being a little more traditional as far as their approach is concerned, have to start thinking about how to handle these new aspects as far as this element of warfare is concerned. How to mount a counter attack on somebody who you do not know, you cannot identify, and you do not know where it is coming from. And of course, we are used to a kind of a war, no war kind of a situation. But cyber attacks are happening daily, consistently, all the time. Somebody is probing your vulnerabilities. That's all for now. Thank you so much for spending a little time paying attention to me. And I'll now hand over back to General Anand.
Yeah, thank you, Admiral Sobti. I think you clearly brought out people, process, and techniques, but also the differences and similarities, which there's much in common, and yet there are so many deep differences. I think you can compare cyber warfare more with counterinsurgency operations than traditional operations, maybe, because there is this gray area where you have to, the enemy is hidden and the enemy remains blended with the population, and the same thing happens in cybersecurity, where you're really not able to identify because he uses various routes and various identities. So I'm now going to request Colonel Madan to give us a few thoughts on emerging technologies for military CII. And while he sets up, just a quick question to Admiral Sobti. We have a national cybersecurity policy in 2013, and we have been in the process of coming out with a national cyber strategy since 2020. And from what my understanding is, it now is at a very high level, getting passed at the apex levels. Hopefully, it will come through this time. Do you think, Admiral Sobti, that it is time for us to also start looking at an armed forces cyber strategy, formally made out, may or may not be disclosed, but at least put together in a very coordinated manner between the three services as we start having integrated commands as well?
So, of course, as far as the armed forces are concerned, there is a defense cyber agency which is mandated to protect the defense forces from cyber threats. And there are each of the three services have their service cyber groups. And there is a lot of coordination between the service cyber groups as well as the defense cyber agency for this particular field. And they are continuously working on what should be the strategy to actually kind of develop the threat system, the threat protection system, and what activities are to be done in this field. The National Cybersecurity Strategy, which is still in draft form, actually is looking at sector-wise measures, especially for new technology. And I think one thing that the armed forces could also be looking concurrently is what kind of defenses or what kind of strategy we build up sector-wise. Because to have a generic strategy is one thing, and to have tailored strategies for each sector, the telecom sector, which is equally applicable to the armed forces, will have its own specific sector-wise strategy. And there'll be other sectors, whether it is networks, surveillance systems, etc. So I think what we can do is to develop a sector-wise strategy, much on the lines of the national cybersecurity strategy.
Yeah, thanks. I totally agree with you. In fact, we know that the armed forces went through their own cyber exercise sometime in May. And then there's been a national cyber exercise which has just concluded lately. Maybe Madan will give us an insight into that. So that did include the armed forces also in it. So there is a coordinated approach which is getting built up, but we need to perhaps speed that up, and a few thoughts from your side as well on this issue.
Right, sir.
Please go ahead with what you have in your mind.
Roger, sir, Roger. So I'll just touch this topic, sir, while I just cover a point on the cybersecurity strategy, sir. Anand, Admiral Sobti, Colonel Sushil, and the esteemed audience. I'll just cover the topic. Time is short, and I'll try and maintain time so that my next panelist also gets adequate time to speak. So while the topic is of protecting military CII and doing some threat analysis and response, let us first, this is just a small snippet. I think sir had already covered this, Anand, but just a clip to say that what was actually told in the Combined Commanders Conference on October 2014. The highlight is that we would like to see a digital armed force. So the moment you go into the digitization realm, automatically the security becomes inherent to it. And while earlier the digitization was actually driving security initiatives, it's now otherwise as well, that security is also now driving the business imperatives and other agendas. Having said this, let's understand what is the larger governing umbrella when we talk about the critical information infrastructure. So the Indian IT Act, so if somebody has to refer, so Indian IT Act 2000 amended in 2008, section 70 is the one which spells out about the critical information infrastructure. And NCI PC happens to be the nodal agency to talk about the critical information infrastructure. And there are some rules defined as to how will the critical infrastructure be actually be managed and handled. So it says that the definition of critical sector is there on the view foil, which says that anything which is critical to the nation whose incapacitation or destruction will have a debilitating impact on national security. This word which is there, debilitating impact, is actually is not a very great disaster, but it actually means it impairs the strength. So something which impairs the strength related to national security or economy would be classified as a critical sector. Here the last point, which is again the rule says that the responsibility of protecting information will be that of the agency running that critical infrastructure, which implies, and taking from the search point, that the strategy and the policy which is coming up, which is the NCRF, which is actually would be there to replace the 2013 security policy and focusing on sectoral regulations, kind of an indication that maybe a cue from what has already been laid down and how to move forward, that each sector will be responsible and therefore laying down sectoral responsibilities and how to manage security would in any case become important. However, a point to note which I would recommend to the audience here, and just it's a thought, a personal thought, that while we will come up with the various policies for sectoral, it is very important that to see are they going to be stitched so that there is no disjointness among the policy implementation, because there is a sectoral dependency also, and this point I would like to cover in my next slide. So how do you basically go about analyzing the threats? So first let's identify that what is the critical information infrastructure actually has been defined. So as I have told you, the definition as per our act is that it should have a debilitating impact on national security, economy, public health or safety. There are certain assessment parameters which go, and which therefore the defense critical infrastructure, it's important to identify from that aspect that even in defense, what is the impact? Impact on the value of the transaction, impact on the number of the transactions, depending on what kind of and what number of devices are interconnected, how many people are going to get affected. When you come to time frame means as to for what time will the system will be non-available after the attack has happened. So similarly, the geographical and the environmental impact, and last is the level of dependency, which says that ultimately attack or an infrastructure which if affected, will it be dependent on some other system, or will it impact some other system, or will it degrade some other sectoral nuance like that. So these are the parameters which must go into identifying the military critical infrastructure as well, which is actually the baseline is the NCIPC document. While I am from Corps of Signals, there are many, all communication infrastructure I would say. However, now with the automation, the way it is going on, your radars, ships, weapons getting digitized, weapons getting connected, IoT coming into military space are the factors which must be considered. The bottom line which I want to bring about is that the current definition of the NCIPC about the critical assets, while you identify the critical assets, there is a term which is keep refiguring in this assessment parameters, which is non-availability. But I would like to go a little further. Is non-availability the only criteria for identifying the critical assets, or even degradation to some extent? So the degradation is only mentioned in the last assessment parameter, which is level of dependency, so that in case one sector gets affected, it degrades the services of the other sector also. But for the other aspects in terms of impact, I think we need to consider into this particular aspect also, that it's not only non-availability, but it's also degradation of the services. Coming to the parameters of business and industrial processes with respect to our organization only. So what is the size and how in terms of the economic impact, the criticality, again the time frame, level of dependency, and whether it is critical or non-critical. To sum it up, there is a different study which says that while you do threat analysis, let's understand a broader perspective, and this is a different view of looking at it. How an organization, whether it is Army, Navy, Air Force, DRDO or other labs, or even the third party organization with whom the defense forces deal in, so what is the organization perspective when you have to define the critical assets? Similarly, what is the vulnerability of the asset? Third point, very important, that is adversary even interested in that asset, and what is the level of interest that the adversary has in that particular asset. And the fourth very important point while we define the critical assets is, it's an important facet, what is going to be the external reaction. When I say external reaction, it means if you have an asset and if the asset is breached, how is the common citizen, public, international community going to look at it? So this external reactions become very, very important while you identify the risks and you ultimately try and define the criticality of the asset. Based on this, you do the threat analysis, and therefore we proceed ahead with some information that I wish to bring out here. So if you see, this is the latest information as of July updated. So the platforms over which the vulnerabilities have been detected, ranging from Microsoft and going down to various platforms, that is Google. So these are the number of vulnerabilities which have been reported in the report. So this kind of indicates that the military critical infrastructure asset, if they are based on these platforms, what is the kind of focus that we need to give to these particular platforms or the systems that are using these kind of background informations. Coming down to the top 10 vulnerabilities, again this information which is on the left of the screen is dated January, and on the right is again, as far as the latest report is concerned, 3 highlights in terms of the majority of the occurrence as to vulnerability, that is sensitive data exposure, security misconfigurations, and information disclosure happen to be the top 3 that I would like to just bring your attention to, besides the other like being weak encryption, spoofing, and the other mechanisms. There is a forum which is called CIRA, so that is Critical Infrastructure Ransomware. So that's a university, that is Temple University, the report. So if you see current this year's 2023, so far 92 ransomware attacks have been reported. And on the right tabular form which you see, that is what kind of sectors actually have been reported with the attacks when it comes to the critical information infrastructure. So while there are government facilities which happen to be the highest in terms of the number of, that's the frequency, and defense industrial base at number 12. But there are intermediaries, that is education, critical manufacturing, transportation, communication, so on and so forth. What does it indicate? From the military perspective, military is not finally going to operate in isolation, and there are dependencies when it comes to implementing infrastructures, when it comes to implementing communication technologies, cybersecurity technologies, which are in any case available from the OEMs across the industry. So which means kind of it's, if I may put a word, so it's a third party risk kind of thing, in which you are dependent on the other sectors, other organizations, other individuals, and this also needs to be looked at very, very critically from the military point of view. So while we have these vulnerabilities, we do some threat analysis. What is the way that we are moving into? So you see, we started from the steam engine, electricity, computing, and now that is the fourth industrial revolution, is the cognitive domain, that is intelligence. So everything that is in the cognitive domain is actually now the way the warfare, it is impacting warfare, and how the systems and the security solutions are being developed.
Can we speed that up a little
Sure,
more?
sir. So in brief, so what is the kind of warfare? Hybrid, unregulated, and new gen. Just to simply say, the hybrid one I have depicted on the view file. The key highlight is irregular forces, support of local unrest, etc. So this is the extract of a book from China, which defines as to what is the unrestricted warfare going to be like. Very, very important when it comes to identifying the assets, information as to the domains in which our military and our bodies need to be prepared for. I am not covering, sorry, in detail due to shortage of time, and then comes to the next gen warfare, which is a concept originated from Russia, which defines that ultimately is going to be in the cognitive domain. Attack the mind. An example of the technology in which the, for example, one of the Iran scientists, this is a public news, I have given the source, that's from BBC. So while he was traveling in a car, the road bend was identified. There was a particular bend on the road in which the speed of the vehicle absolutely almost became zero. There was a pre-planted gun which was controlled through air remotely. The moment the car went past there, the bullet actually hit the scientist only while he was traveling with his family and nobody else, because his earlier scans were taken. After some time, the weapon and the vehicle was given the command for self-destruction. So AI is there. So this is the short story in there. I'm coming towards the end. So what are the top technology 10 military trends? So there's this sources there. So starting from blockchain, so I'm writing them in the order of their importance, and 5G, 6G, big data analytics, additive manufacturing, which is basically 3D printing, immersive technologies, internet of military things, cyber warfare. When I say cyber warfare, this is again an important technological trend in which there are hundreds of domains, but I'll just touch very, very few, which is maybe we need to consider focus on dark web monitoring, de-anonymization, authentication, operational technology, and even forensics. Robotics and autonomous system, advanced defense equipment, hypersonic missiles, long-range weapons, and overall artificial intelligence. So these are the technological trends which have been reported based on the information gathered by around more than 1,000 companies and startups, kind of based on the technologies that they are developing for the military. If you see AI, it actually covers the whole gamut of all these technologies which I have just mentioned below, because AI applies in every facet, every domain possible. Coming to the cyber security aspect in particular, so there are many technologies which we need to actually build upon. So as the National Centre of Excellence, which I lead, which is an initiative of DSCI and METI, there are many startups and technologies that we are working on, so that there are homegrown solutions available for the country, which can also become a reference for the global industry as well. So some technologies which are very, very important to understand from the military perspective also. I'll just touch on very few. So let me just, while they are all listed, you understand, I would just touch upon one is privacy engineering techniques, other is application security, which is missing from here in my data, and third is the quantum security. When I come to privacy engineering, we are having so much critical information asset which is
Madan,
actually
I think
interwoven.
we'll keep that for a little later, otherwise,
Sure,
we won't get a chance to have
Sure,
an
sir.
interactive
Sure, sir.
time. We're running out of time, although we started a little late, but we have about 5-7 minutes.
Sure, sir. So these are the again a list of whole bunch of technologies that one could talk about, but if you could just quickly glance through it, and I'll just cover my last slide, which I would like to make is the recommendation in terms of people, process, and technology. I would say that when it comes to the title, which is the protecting the military CII, doing the threat analysis and the response, this particular 3 pillars cannot be actually be looked away. From the people perspective, we need to build skilled people who are not only capable of handling defensive capabilities, but even have capabilities so that this cyber resiliency can actually be more. We need to define processes. How do we go about actually handling these people, their turnovers within the military environment, their skill sets, and ultimately the technologies, which means that there are huge bunch of technologies that we need to focus on. Maybe as a military forum, we need to see that do we need to invest with right kind of R&D bodies and forum to make sure that we are investing at the right time to create a right skill set for the coming cyber era. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thanks. In fact, I think your last points really resonate. We are looking at human resources, skill development, and we are also looking at more technologies to be inducted into the armed forces and into the critical infrastructure that we have. So thanks a lot. I think you've given us a real helicopter view of the entire gamut of what we are facing in front of us and what we need to do. I'm going to straight away go now to Colonel Sushil Pradhan. Sushil, you are a TVRA expert, if I may put it that way.
Yes, sir.
So you can put it in those words to us and also tell us some mitigation techniques for our critical infrastructure.
Yeah, thank you, sir, and thank you everyone for being here. And it's an honor to be here in USI as part of USI. I have a long association with the USI. I've got lots of published articles in the USI journal, which is their flagship journal. So I pulled out my USI CUN-PK tie for today's event. I have represented the Center for UN Peacekeeping in Germany as an instructor on behalf of USI, where I spent a month. So there's a story connected to that, and when I went to Germany for this course, which we were to conduct for international peacekeepers who had come from 26 countries, and there were 13 of us instructors. So the first thing that we did is we realized on the first day that most of us spoke very different languages. Not all of us were conversant with English. A lot of us were conversant with languages from Eastern Europe and France and French language. So the first thing we did is we aligned ourselves to, okay, what language are we going to conduct this course in? And that is what is my take on this particular aspect of cyber resilience in military security. Military systems, Admiral Sobti brought out, are primarily legacy systems. And like I'm running against the clock today, they are all running against the clock to keep themselves updated, because all these systems need to talk to others, talk to each other in the same language, whether it's a weapon system, whether it's a communication system. So taking that parallel, what is the language in which IT systems and information systems talk to each other? Anyone? What do we call that? What do we call that? The language which IT and information systems talk to each other in? We call it the operating system, right? So now operating system is something that needs to be secure and needs to be updated at the same time, because you can't have two pieces of equipment in which one is the whole software is configured on Windows and the other one is configured on Linux, and then they are trying to talk to each other in the battlefield. It's like, soldiers and sailors when we talk to each other, with due respect, Admiral Sobti. So when we if an army guy wants, if a navy guy wants to tell, or an air force guy wants to tell an army guy, look, my line of direction, I see an enemy ship on the starboard, just for example. Now the first thing the army guy is going to wonder is, what is starboard? Okay. Then he says, look to port. He says, which port? You are flying over the desert. I don't see any port around anywhere. So that's how we got to realign ourselves. And I'm not going to take up a lot of time because this is a vast subject. I'm just going to touch upon the aspect of language, and that is the communication language. So as you see, and which I think General Anand also brought out, India is one of the most targeted and attacked countries in terms of cyber security. In Asia Pacific, we were one of the top 3. And all these cyber attackers now have evolved various kinds. So ransomware was very popular 2 years back. Today we are even looking at multi-factor authentication, phishing scams, vishing scams. And in the military we say, oh, we are safe from all this because we are all air-gapped. So I have another expert from my company sitting here, Inder. He says there is no such thing as air gapping. Air gapping is a myth because it can be overcome by various technologies. If you want to look or hear more about it, please reach out to us directly. There's a lot of information on these slides. I don't have the time to tell you all of that. How many of you use LinkedIn? Yeah, just reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to share this presentation with you. Okay. So why is cyber resilience in the military a question mark? The primary reason is what you see on the slide, is that the tools that we use today are of the late 90s vintage. And what are we focusing? The threats are of the early 20s vintage. And we are solving today's problems with yesterday's tools. That's the whole issue in military cybersecurity. Because of what Admiral Sobti said, that we are running legacy systems. The military is a huge behemoth of technology, of systems, of weapons. To get everyone to change together is a huge challenge. So what do you do? So we'll come to what do you do. And there's an exponential rise in sophistication of attacks. And as far as APTs are concerned, advanced persistent threats, consistently we have been seeing that countries like China, Pakistan, North Korea, and many others who are, sponsored by them are attacking Indian systems or attempting to attack systems. So what would the military like? A wish list. What would they like? A security shield that can actually protect the whole spectrum of military CII and digital assets. I have just put some of them in the form of pictures so you can sort of relate to all of that. And what is the size and scale? Our challenges are that most of our systems are written in Linux. Some of them are based on Windows, and today a large number of them are based in Android, especially the ones that we buy commercially off the shelf. We say, okay, let's use commercially off the shelf technology. Let's buy a drone from X country, but that drone software is programmed in Android. Your systems are programmed in Linux. So how does that air defense system send the information from the radar to the control center and back to the drone? So all these challenges need to be overcome, and these are the places where attackers look for the gaps. Where you have the gap in communication, that's where the persistent attacks look for the gaps. And honestly speaking, while there are huge indigenization efforts on, our own foolproof operating system looks about 5 to 7 years away, to the stage where it can be used in weapon platforms. So that's the harsh reality of military cybersecurity. So we don't have any indigenous operating systems, and there's a lot of information on how APTs work, but all these languages, technologies, they are all prone to attack by APTs. So what can we do? So we just have two ideas. We call it, superimposing a system on top of the existing operating systems. We call it a configurable hardware enforced safety and security, or CHESS for short. This is not proprietary. This is just one example where it takes behaviors, it takes advanced mitigation techniques, it takes patent protection and puts all of this together. Basically, it addresses the needs of all the subject matters that are required, and it is highly customizable. So this is just one example. There are many more such being developed by industry for military systems, and I'm sure in due course the military will evaluate all of these, come to see which is the best one and figure out what works best for them. This is just a hugely complicated slide just to impress all of you that I know a lot more than I actually do, but it has a lot of useful information. Like I said, if you would like to go through it in detail, I'll send you the slides. Yeah. So that's all I had to say about this topic. I have a little more to speak on cybersecurity and AI, but I will not do it now. If time permits, sir, I'll take on. I think that's a sexy topic, so everyone wants to hear what AI is doing.
We'll come over to that in a
Sure.
minute. Let's just kind of keep it here for the moment, because once we get into AI, we open up a whole Pandora's box. And we will be doing, and I'm going to invite you there. We're going to do a very, very exclusive session on AI in military applications on the 20th of November at the USI with an international panel. And this panel has been advising the United Nations on what regulations to bring in. And Admiral Sobti and his team are most welcome to comment on that as well. So I think that's an occasion when we'll be able to talk about this one-on-one. But clearly, I think what we are looking for now, we've got, as I said, an eagle's eye view of the threat of cybersecurity. We also know that military infrastructure appears to be invulnerable because it is exclusive, but then that could very well be a myth. In fact, it is a myth. And therefore, we have to start building up on, as you said, people, process, techniques and technologies. And that has to be different from the usual way we do it. So are we getting into that now? What is our readiness level? Well, that would be, again, a discussion for another day. But certainly, that needs to be secured. So we are certainly looking for a clear policy and governing framework, which we need to bring into the military. And it needs to give out that clarity down to the unit level, because what we do at the headquarter level, we may be feeling safe, but there are hundreds of attack surfaces which open up, vulnerable surfaces which open up when you come down to the unit level. And therefore, and a very interesting point that also came out was that when we get the entire linkage between the sensor and shooter finally, there are numerous interfaces, and all those interfaces become points of vulnerability. So these are the places that we need to focus on, and those linkages have to be built up. Of course, we need to have strong identity and access management controls, a good response plan. We need to also probably come down to faster computing, because the time gap between sensing and shooting has to be reduced. So there is so much more vulnerability which needs to be covered. So I think with that, we'll kind of put it a cap on for today. We could have carried on with this topic in a lot more detail, which we will do in the future, in our future discussions. So thank you very much, Colonel Madan, Colonel Sushil, Admiral Sobti, for being here with us today. And we need to get together again on this topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for that very, very insightful session. And thank you so much for joining us. Yes, we can clap a little more louder, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.